to the final day of the Citizens for Global Solutions National Convention. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, for today only, my name is Bob Flax, and I'm the Executive Director of Citizens for Global Solutions. Our board chair, Donna Park, will now review the Zoom etiquette for the day and handle a few other housekeeping matters. So Donna, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And welcome to everyone. We do have a few new people, but I'll try to go through the ground rules really quickly. I've been doing this each day. So I put a link in the Zoom chat where you can open up the ground rules. Oh, I'm supposed to share that with you, aren't I? Let me share my screen. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So this is, if you click on the link, you can get to the Zoom etiquette. The most important thing for you to know is that we're using the chat box communication if you want to talk with each other, either as a group or individually, or if you want to report a technical problem. Actually, Chelsea isn't able to be with us today, but Janet Mercer, you can either send a private message to Janet Mercer or just tell everybody you're having trouble and Janet will help you. But when you want to ask, you don't use the chat to ask questions of the speaker or Bob or the facilitators. So you use the participant panel for that. So you click on the link that looks like this in the middle here. I'm circling it with my cursor, two little people. You click on that link in your Zoom window. If you don't see it, just put your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom window and look for it. A panel will open, and at the bottom of the panel, you can raise your cyber hand. If you can't figure that out, then just raise your physical hand in the window, and Bob will do his best to slip you in. So we will, Zoom will keep stack of people in the order in which they raise their cyber hands. However, we will give preference to those who haven't had a chance to speak yet as the evening goes on. So the first time around, we'll take you as you come, but after that, Bob will try to give preference to people who haven't spoken at all. We will ask everybody to keep themselves mute, except the speaker, of course. And so you'll have to unmute when Bob calls upon you or the speaker to ask your question. And then when you're done, we ask that you unmute yourself. You can do mute and unmute from that participant panel by putting your cursor on your picture, or you can put your cursor on your image in the Zoom window and mute and unmute yourself from there. So I think we are recording these sessions, just so you know, and I'm serving as the official timekeeper, so I'll be letting speakers know when their time is roughly half up, and then as they near the end of their time. I think that's it, Bob.
Okay, well, thank you, Donna. The only other logistical item that I'd like to add, as I mentioned yesterday, is that we've invited any CGS board members who have their official CGS polo shirts, which I'm wearing now, to wear them. And we've invited, yes, right, Donna has it too. Yeah, so all CGS board members could stand up, please. Yeah, do a polo shirt. So we've invited the board members who have polo shirts to wear them, but also invited everybody else to wear anything that they have that either represents another World Federalist Organization or expresses or symbolizes any aspect of world citizenship. So as you see people speak today, you may also see the names of other organizations or related causes or things like that. I see we probably have enough people that we could do a world citizen fashion show from the way it looks like. So everybody heard that yesterday. That's great. So as we did yesterday, what I'd like to do is to open the floor for any quick insights, revelations, or takeaways that you had from our presentations yesterday. We ask you again to please be brief, just a sentence or two, and we'll first invite people who haven't spoken so far and again, as Donna just said, if you can raise your hand in the participants box, I will see them. I will first call on people that I don't remember having spoken yet, and then we'll get to folks who are having trouble with the technology, in which case you can raise your hand just in your window. I do say if you're raising your flesh and blood hand, If you do it the way you do in school, no one will see it. It'll be to the side like this. See, no one will see it. So if you raise your flesh and blood hand, you have to do something strange and like put it in front of your face, so it's visible on the camera. So that's the only little aerobics there. So anyway, I already see a few hands in the chat box, or participants box rather. For the moment, those are people who've already spoken. So let me see if there's anyone who hasn't. And if not, I will get to the people who've already spoken. Okay, so I don't see anyone who hasn't. So let's go for who's there. So first, Tom Camarella. Again, this is brief. Want to get a few people in. Thank you. You need to unmute yourself, Tom. Tom, you're still muted.
Just wanted to say that so far it's been terrific. The way to contact Bill Pace was up there, and I'm not sure I got it down correctly. Can anybody?
Yes, that was a slip. We did not intend to give Bill's direct email address. If you want to contact Bill, send it to outreach@globalsolutions.org. We will let Bill know. We did not intend, it was an accident. We did not intend to give Bill's direct email address. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up so everybody could hear that. If you got it, that was a slip. He did not give us permission to give out his email address. Thank you. Okay, on to Chuck Woolery.
I don't think I've ever been more inspired by this group in terms of the young people who were speaking and the things they were saying, and then particularly the music and dance stuff that Chelsea selected. I was just blown away by it. Just really acknowledge the heck out of it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Now on to Tom Hastings. Tom, you need to unmute. Yes, Tom, you're still muted.
Okay. Also,
right.
Something in my mouth, but I was impressed with the use of Reddit, and I didn't know whether any of us in our social media team were using Reddit. I quickly read about Reddit, and you can post something, and if people like it, it rises, and it gets lots of likes, then it becomes even more popular. And it would be a great thing for us to be using to get our message out with a good post.
Great, thank you, Tom. And any other comments from yesterday? Anything that came up yesterday? Any insights, revelations, connections? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's move on. So the literature in the World Federalist Movement describes several paths to reaching our long-term goal. Some years ago, a team at the Democratic World Federalists, based in San Francisco, developed an image to try to convey those paths in a simple and straightforward way. It may not be perfect, but I think it gives a good idea, a good summary in one image of the kind of the lay of the land of the literature out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that image on the screen and use it to provide some context for both what we've been covering and talking about so far, as well as for our next presentation. So if you give me a moment, I'm going to push a button or two and share my screen and get that on the screen. So that, hold on a moment. Okay. That, and let's see, screen 2, okay, and push that, and expand that, and let me know if you see an image of a mountain with 4 paths on it.
We see it. I see it.
Terrific. Okay, so so this was our rendition a number of years ago to describe what the different literatures on getting to a world federation. I should give credit where credit is due. There are at least 3 people in this conference who've been participating, who were involved in this. One was Shahryar Sharee. I believe he was the vice president of the Democratic World Federalists at that time. The other is Roger Cotilla, who was on as a participant yesterday and asked a few questions. And the third person is yours truly. We worked together for quite a while to redesign the website at that time. And the graphic designer that we work with came up with this rendition. So what you see starting on the left is probably the route that's gotten the most attention, at least from Citizens for Global Solutions and our related organization, which is to transform the UN. People know it's not perfect, but a lot of people feel it's what we have, so we need to work there. But within that path, there are at least several different strategies. Many of you are familiar with some of them. There's what Shahryar talked about just yesterday, which is going kind of, direct, one might say directly for the jugular and having a charter review to get to the foundation, the creating document for the UN and change it right there into a constitution. Then there are other routes that are more incremental in steps and stages, like Andreas Brummel from Democracy Without Borders, who's looking at a more like what seems to be a three-step approach, starting with the UNPA as being the first step, the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, and then two other steps that will then bring the UN to being a world federation. So that's kind of the first route, and a lot of activity has been focused on that. But as this shows, there have been three others in the literature. There are those that feel, the UN is either so hopelessly broken or so mired in bureaucracy that we have to work outside of it. And those people, as I said, tend to fall into three camps. So the next one, integrate the regions. And you saw Amelia yesterday from Democracia Global from Latin America. They're focusing on that. There are those who feel that getting to this World Federation thing is a two-step process. The first step is you build strong regional federations like the EU, the African Union, the South American, Latin American Union, et cetera, et cetera. And once those are robust, then it's kind of, I'll say simple, but it's not. But you might say conceptually, it's a simple process of connecting the dots. And then once those regions are connected, you can build the World Federation out of that. And those people have, their argument that that's kind of an evolutionary way that the world is going. So that's another camp. And then a third camp is somewhat similar, but they're saying rather than uniting nations by region, we should bring the democracies of the world together. That's the way to start. And actually, some of you may be aware, I think maybe even there was a conference just a few days ago of folks who are in that camp and presenting papers and discussions and all around that. So that's there, it's alive and robust. Probably one of the main proponents of that path is an Australian fellow by the name of Chris Hamer, who's done a lot of writing about that. And we're hoping to invite him at our next convention. And then last but not least is there's a group of people that got together, I think back in the 60s, Glenn will talk more about this, and essentially began with the creation of a world constitution and looked at how do you actually go kind of right to the source and create it right there. And then once it's created and built, you could begin to reveal it to the nations that could align within it and under the World Constitution. So as I said, Glenn will talk more about that in a moment, but let me get my, stop sharing my screen here. Hold on, this will take another button or two. And then that, yes. So last thing I want to say about that is some people working on the various paths interact a lot with each other. Some people may even be involved with several different paths, while others interact very little. So it's become our custom in Citizens for Global Solutions that at each convention, we try to invite other parts of the World Federalist family to come and present, and parts that folks involved with CGS and related organizations might not know as much about. And that brings me to our first guest speaker for today, Glen T. Martin. Glen is a professor of philosophy at Radford University in Virginia, where he's also the founder and chair emeritus of their Peace Studies program. Glen's president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, for short, I'll refer to it as WCPA, which sponsors the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, the subject of Glen's presentation. Glen is also president of International Philosophers for Peace and has traveled and lectured worldwide on behalf of the Earth Constitution and the philosophical foundations of emerging world law, as well as on behalf of WCPA projects such as sessions of the Provisional World Parliament and the development of a world court system. Unlike many other World Federalist organizations, Glen has been particularly active in the Global South. In fact, I met with him some years ago at a conference that was being presented in Lucknow, India. So Glen's done a lot of work down there. Glen has been a vocal critic of the dominant world system of capitalism, integrated within a political organization of militarized sovereign states, and has articulated an alternative world federalist vision. Glen has received several international peace awards, including the Guzzi Peace Prize International in Manila, the Philippines. Glen's also the author or editor of 11 books and has published hundreds of articles in popular as well as academic venues. And in a moment, I will post links in the chat box to Glen's website and blog so that you could learn more about his organization and his writings. At this time, I'm delighted to introduce Glen Martin. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Bob. I have a PowerPoint here, a few slides to show, and I would like to try to ask you if you can see. Can you see that now? Is that on your screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, is it full? Okay.
Yep.
So one thing we've done that's fairly recent that Bob didn't mention because it's so recent is that we've combined the World Constitution and Parliament Association with a 501c3 organization here in the United States that's now called the Earth Constitution Institute. You can see that on the screen, the first screen there. So the two organizations now work together under the same group of leaders, and the ECI, the Earth Constitution Institute, is a 501c3 nonprofit, whereas the World Constitution and Parliament Association is a worldwide organization which is registered in India and various places, but doesn't function as a nonprofit in the United States. Okay, let's see if we can go to the first screen here.
You should be able to just click the down arrow, or
Yeah, I have it on mine. Let me see if I can. What's going on here?
we're still seeing your first screen.
Okay,
Do
can you
you-
see it?
Okay, yep, you're there.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll skip. Since how long do I have, Donna? Just so I can
You
get
have
an
fo-
idea.
Well, there's 45 minutes in total. We would like to give folks at least a 10 or 15-minute Q&A at the end, but the total segment is 45 minutes.
Okay, so about half an hour talking.
Yeah, give or
Oh,
take.
okay. So I want to put the Earth Constitution in context, and I've done this in some of my books that I've written about it. Now, this is not official view of a WCPA, which focuses only on the Constitution, but as a philosopher, I like to put things in larger context. And so you can see on this first screen, there's a depiction in the graphic of the development of the universe, right? Beginning 13.7 billion years ago with matter and the Big Bang, and then the development of life on, we know at least that life exists on Earth some 3.8 billion years ago. And then those one-celled life those cells have multiplied into higher creatures, into animals, and then finally into mammals. And out of mammals came pre-humans or hominids. And then the evolutionary process has included, and many of you probably know there's quite a significant literature on this, on the development of stages of human consciousness. And so this is one depiction of that development. It speaks of archaic human beings, and then an age of magical consciousness and mythic consciousness. And then rational consciousness is the began in the famous axial period in human history between the 8th and the 2nd century before the Common Era, and has continued to the present. And there, as many of you also know, there are many now who are speaking of the possibility of our being in a second axial age, where the rational person focusing on individual consciousness perhaps will move to a planetary consciousness, and something. And in this particular chart, you can see that the higher levels are called spirit. This comes from people like Ken Wilber, who has done a lot of work on this and so on. So here's can you see the new screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So here's a more elaborated schemata of human development that comes from people like Ken Wilber, but there are many thinkers working in this area. He's just one of the most famous of them. And they often associate the developmental stages in human consciousness with colors, right? And so you can see on this stage moving up, there's the red or the tribal, and the parallel would be not just primitive humanity, but children. All of us, when we were 4 years old, were in this red stage, this egocentric stage, and so on. And but beyond that, people become socialized. Children become socialized. Mommy and daddy say, good girls don't do that, nice boys don't do that. And eventually we become assimilated into our language, our religion, our culture, our nation, and so on. And we move to you can see on the chart, the amber stage. We become ethnocentric or nation-centric. And it seems to us from that point of view, when we look at other cultures, we recognize that they're different, but they always seem less rational, less natural than our own. Our own has given preference in thinking and so on. So these stages continue. Ken Wilber depicts another stage beyond that: values and rationality, individualism and democracy. When we begin to become world-centric, we begin seeing there's a world, and that reason has this kind of universal character to it. And then beyond that, once we're world-centric, people become more pluralistic. They begin to appreciate the difference in cultures and so on, where people are relativistic, no longer prefacing their own culture as they did in the ethnocentric. And then you can see on this chart, there's a break, right? There's a break, and from the point of view of Ken Wilber and other thinkers in this tradition, there are higher levels that we haven't yet, most of us haven't yet ascended to yet. The integral level has 3 dimensions to it, and the second dimension you can see, which is light blue, it sees the world as alive and evolving. It's holistic and cosmocentric. It lives from both an individual self and a transpersonal self. So I take, I don't think there's any one schemata that is, can be considered the correct schemata, but I take this general idea of the need for human beings to develop, continue to develop emotionally, spiritually, cognitively, morally, as being correct. And I want to make the case with you today when we talk about the Earth Constitution that it is a key element in that kind of transformational process. So let me, and I also, as Bob mentioned in his fine introduction that he made for my talk, I've in my writings, I've spent a good deal of time analyzing and criticizing militarized nation state system, which is interfaced with global capitalism. Right? There are many thinkers, most of them in the world systems theoretical tradition, who see these two institutions as not as separate, but as intimately related: sovereign nation states and global capitalism. And in this new chart here, what I have done is taken a well-known chart made by Ken Wilber, in which you can see he has divided human life into four quadrants. The upper left is the self and consciousness. The upper right is the science and scientific development. The lower left, culture and worldview. And the lower right, economic and governmental systems. And the axis in each of these, which is on the diagonal, he identifies a growth process, right? So you can see in the upper left the magical self, like each of us probably had when we were young children, to an egocentric self, to a mythic self, to an achiever self, which is quite common under contemporary modern life, to a progressively maturing human self, going forward toward a holistic and integral level. And the same kind of development we can see in the lower left, the culture and worldview, right? That we need, and to address our fundamental problems, Wilbur and others say, we need to pay attention. We need conscious evolution. We need to be thinking on how we can move ourselves, our subjectivity, our culture, our institutions, our economic and governmental institutions. How can we move these toward more mature forms, past the terrible threats that we now face? We're on the lower right, we're now at the level of sovereign territorial states. And you can see I've added as a higher level in the blue box there, the Earth Federation under the Earth Constitution. We're not, obviously not there yet. We're at the level of sovereign territorial states. So I argue, and this chart actually appears in my most recent book, my 2018 book called Global Democracy and Human Self-Transcendence. And in that book, I argue that our present institutions, global institutions, the dominant ones, militarized nations and global capitalism, that these don't just reside in the economic and governmental systems quadrant. They don't just make a mess of the world politically and economically. What they do is impact the whole of human life. They impact the other three quadrants as well. And that's why I have here the arrows, right? The obviously militarized nations and global capitalism, what do? They colonize most scientific research in the world for war research, nuclear weapons, right? As some people have speculated, this COVID pandemic that we're now experiencing may be a result of this kind of biochemical war research that has escaped from some lab, whether in Fort Detrick, Maryland, or in Wuhan, China, wherever. But what a shame this is. You know, science, which could be used to contribute to human well-being, is colonized by this system, this capitalist and militarized nation system. It's colonized and misdirected toward this horrible war research. And the same thing in the level of culture and worldview. It breeds cultures of fear and insecurity, and very similar, because we live in cultures of fear and insecurity, our subjectivity is often characterized by hate and fear and a similar insecurity, right? People don't trust one another. They don't love one another. They're suspicious of differences. They find, Russia and China and the US and Iran and North Korea, there's this terrible, all this suspicion and tension. It needs to, all of this could change if we manage to transcend this system at the bottom here, militarized nations and global capitalism. So I want to.
Glenn,
yes.
you're roughly through your first half. That's about 15 minutes, just to let you know.
All right. Thank you, Donna. So I want to emphasize, right, that under our present world system, right, we have unrestricted military spending for missiles and weapons buildup under the private control of each nation, right? There's no authority to deal with that. The planetary atmosphere, the planetary hydrosphere, the forests producing the O2 that we all need, and so on, are all under the private control of each nation. And this is also true of the UN system, which is predicated on the system of sovereign nations. The UN Sustainable Goals, which I've written about, I've got a whole chapter on them in my new book that's coming out in January. The UN Sustainable Goals, in their introduction, that has been signed by most of the nations in the world, number 18, they say, we affirm that every state has and shall freely exercise full permanent sovereignty over all its wealth, natural resources, and economic activity. That means that under the Sustainable Development Goals, Brazil has the legal right to destroy the lungs of the earth, right? The lungs of the earth reside in Brazil. They have, but under the UN system and under the system of sovereign nations, Brazil owns the lungs of the earth. They can destroy it, right? That means, as we're all in the example we're all familiar with, that the United States can withdraw from the Paris Climate Treaty because it's a sovereign nation. Nothing is binding, right? That it has the legal right to do that, and so on and so on. So the Earth Constitution, under Article 4, as you can see, gives the Earth Federation government, that is the people of Earth, sovereignty over the vital resources that are necessary for human survival, over the oceans, over the hydrosphere of the Earth, over the atmosphere of the Earth. So amazingly enough, if this movement, as Bob pointed out, goes way back to the 1958, WCPA was founded. In 1968, they organized an international meeting that took place in Interlaken, Switzerland. This is a photo of it here on the right. And they got together and they decided we needed to write a constitution for the earth. And they elected a drafting committee of some 25 people and gave them directions on how to write it. And so the drafting committee went to work And by 9 years later, they had a draft that they had circulated widely among the people from 1968, with lots of feedback, and they went over that draft paragraph by paragraph in Innsbruck, Austria, in 1977. They met again in Colombo, Sri Lanka, 1979. We call these the constituent assemblies for the Earth Constitution. And then finally, they met in Troia, Portugal, 1991. They made a number of small changes in wording, and they decided that it was finished, it was final, that the Earth did not have the time, did not have the freedom to work some, for a long time to get something, because they understood the planetary crisis. If you look at their literature, it's amazing. They understand the collapse of the environment in the 1980s and 90s. They understand the threat of nuclear weapons. So under the beginning, the first draft on the second Constituent Assembly, which took place in 1977, the Constitution empowers us as human beings to create provisional world government, to start it. We don't have to wait until some future date when the whole thing is ratified. We can start doing it now. So you can see on the left here that there have been 14 sessions of the Provisional World Parliament, from the first one in Brighton, England, 1982, to the most recent one, Kolkata, India, in 2015. And here's a photo of the head table from the 11th session of the Parliament. So they're operating under Article 19 of the Constitution. And what the Constitution does is transcend this system that is blocking human growth and endangering our future on the planet. The system of sovereign nations, militarized nation states, linked up with global capitalism. It transcends that system and gives us an integrated world system, which addresses our human problems directly, and in my view, very powerfully too. So it overcomes the sovereign nation states, the capitalist system. It's based on the common good of the whole and the human dignity of each person. And it's design that is necessary to give us a system. Right? Peace is not just people in nations not agreeing not to fight with one another or to disarm. Peace has to be a system, systematically designed. And the same with justice, if we're going to have it in the world, and the same with sustainability. And the Constitution does all three of those. So this is one depiction of the structure of the Earth Federation. And on the right, there is the broad functions of it. So its first broad function, prevent war and secure disarmament. The second, protect human rights worldwide. Third, create conditions for universal prosperity. Regulate and protect world resources. Protect the ecological fabric of an environment for life on Earth, and devise solutions to all problems beyond the scope of national governments. And this mandala is the design. It's got a tricameral parliament made up of these three outer circles. The purple, the House of Peoples, from 1,000 electoral districts worldwide. They'll have representatives in the House of Peoples. House of Nations, every nation will have 1, 2, or 3 representatives in the House of Nations, depending on the number of people in the nation. So big nations like the United States would have 3 representations there. The House of Councilors, a unique feature of this Constitution, using special processes of nomination and so on. House of of 200 people from 20 electoral districts around the world will be filled with people who are experts on the environment, people who are known for their wisdom, people who are known as peacemakers, and so on. They'll be part, and those three houses together are the ultimate authority. This is a parliamentary system, right? So the parliament has the authority, not an executive branch, and so on. And then in the yellow circle, underneath there's what is known as the 7 agencies of the integrative complex. 7 agencies. This is all in Article 8 of the Earth Constitution, all of which are designed to monitor the world system, protect the world system, make sure the world system is running efficiently with highly qualified professionals in the world civil service. And all these 7 agencies, including the World Financial Administration, which is one of them, they're all available, right, to the world. So we have institutions that are sort of like the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Scientists, only these institutions are governmental. They have authority, unlike the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Scientists, which are, which are continually telling us how bad our situation is, yet they have no authority to influence anybody or to stop the destruction of the environment. So here's another depiction of the same structure set up by the Earth Constitution. The World Parliament has these 3 houses: the House of Peoples, House of Councillors, House of Nations. And under the world, those 3 houses, there's 4 main agencies: the World Court, the World Executive, the World Police, and the World Ombudsman. And you can see them represented here as pentagons. Right? The reason they're pentagons is because none of these agencies has a single head. They're through a process of being elected by the parliament itself. They elect one pole of the Pentagon, one of a presidium of 5 people from each continental division of the world. So each of these will be headed by a person from Asia, person from Europe, person from North America, South America, and Africa. It's a unity and diversity is built into this Constitution from beginning to end. And this is one feature of the unity and diversity.
You have about 4 more minutes, Glenn.
4 more minutes,
for your talk.
okay. Okay. So a key feature of this, I've been in touch with Ellen Brown. You may know her well-known book, The Web of Debt, where she talks about the global debt system that is puts the bankers in control of everything. This is World Constitution gives us global public banking, interest-free development loans, debt-free money creation. It transforms the global economic system away from rule by the wealthy and the bankers to democratic rule by the people of Earth. It's a transformative document. It is what we need for a future, to have any future at all on this planet. So WCPA and the Earth Constitution Institute, these are the things that we're doing now. We're collaborating with NGOs and activists. Very often they'll do their work under the banner of the Earth Constitution. So if they're environmental organizations or human rights organizations, they're doing it under Article 19. They're saying, we're working for world government through our human rights activities and so on. We're developing chapters and individual supporters worldwide, of course, and we continue to do that. It's really exploding in India. We have thousands and thousands of people in India that are identifying with us in this way. And we're in the process of defining and organizing some of the 1,000 electoral districts. And here is our new initiative. In 1 minute that I have left, Anna, here is our new initiative. We're investigating and working with people to create secure online voter registration using blockchain technology. And so we're creating electoral commissions and registered voters within electoral districts. And what we'll do when this is sufficiently developed is create a virtual world parliament with delegates elected from these electoral districts. And that virtual world parliament will be the first step in ratifying the Earth Constitution. So that's the direction that we're not just waiting around for somehow this thing to be passively done. Under Article 19, we're laying out the actual infrastructure for making it happen, the groundwork for getting the Constitution there on the earth. And just one more point, we're not the Earth Constitution itself says that the UN, all the viable UN agencies will be integrated into the Earth Federation government. So we're not abandoning the UN. The only thing that needs to be abandoned is that horrific charter that blocks everything. It's predicated on militarism and it's predicated on sovereignty of nations. But all the World Health Organization, the High Commission on Human Rights, everything the UN is doing that's valuable like this will naturally form the core of the initial Earth Federation government. So that's it in the half an hour that I have. That's an overview of what we're doing and the way I see the function I see the Earth Constitution having in our attempt to mature on this planet to a holistic and harmonious human civilization without war, without destroying the environment, and so on.
Great,
Okay.
thank you so much, Glenn, for that informative presentation. If you would stop sharing your screen, we'll transition to questions and comments. The way I would like to do that is I'm first going to invite people that have questions only. So a question, as you know, is a request for information. So if there's information you want from Glenn, if you would put your hand up in the participants box. This is not the time for comments, speeches, anything like that. This is a request for information. Then once we've gotten through all the questions, then I will open it up for comments if anyone would like to say anything as a comment. But I want to make sure that all the questions get asked first. So with that, the first question comes from Arthur Kanegas. Take it away, Arthur. You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Arthur. I can't hear you.
Arthur, we still can't hear you.
You're having trouble hearing me?
I can hear you now,
but it's very low if you lean in toward your microphone, so we can hear you.
Forward. Now is it good?
Much better.
Very
What's
good.
your question?
Yes. Okay. The key question, this is fantastic. My key question is, in voting, have you developed any way to get a more synergistic system of voting so that it's not win-lose, the majority rule, but rather something that's more evolved, something beyond that?
Yes, we've been working on that for a number of years. We're not at the stage of actually having the digital voting I was talking about done yet, but we intend to have it much more sophisticated than the win-lose, weighted voting or some system of voting that that includes everybody and doesn't exclude people who are declared losers and so on. Yeah, it's a good question.
Right. Thank you, Glenn. Our second question is from Simon. You have to unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Glenn, that was excellent. Where can we read what you told us about with these charts and facts and figures? Where can we read it?
It's in the chat box. I put the link to Glenn's blog and his his organizations in the chat box.
How do we find the chat box here?
You click on chat at the bottom of your screen and the chat box will appear.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But Glenn, did you want to add something to that?
Well, yeah, you can go to our website, which is Earth Federation, Earth Constitution, all one word, .world, earthconstitution.world. And my website, my personal website is oneworldrenaissance.com. And at that website, many of my articles are posted, and they talk about, you can tell from the titles of them, they'll talk about the development of human consciousness, or the axial period, things like that. Or I have one called The Tragedy of the Planetary Commons, which depicts some of what I talked about today, that right now, the oceans of the world, for example, and the atmosphere of the world and the forests of the world are part of a commons that is being destroyed, because these things should belong to the people of Earth, not to this or that nation, or in the case of the oceans, they don't belong to anybody.
Could you?
Okay, thank you, Glenn. It looks like we have one more question before we move to comments. Simon, we can pick you up again in the comments. Thank you. So Bill Pace, our next question.
Well, mine, I'm sorry, I was a little late getting in, but I'm just trying to remember the wonderful man that was outside of Denver who was deeply involved with
Philip Isley.
Philip
Isley.
Very good. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I just had forgotten Philip's name. Thank you.
Yeah. And we give him great credit, because he had this energy and this vision. He got it all going, and he's still there. And in fact, in my new book, where I talk about the environment, I quote from Philip Isley's. He developed certain lists of the environmental problems being faced by the planet, and the ways that the Earth Constitution would address these. And I quote his lists in that book.
Great, thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions in the participants box, if you would raise your hand if you have a comment. And we'll start with David Gallup.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Philip Isley. I find it fascinating that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Philip Isley came to this idea of this world constitution because he was a conscientious objector during World War II, and I think he actually went to jail during this. And so it's such an interesting comparison to Gary Davis, who went to war and then decided, no, war is wrong, and found, coming to the uniting of humanity important. And Philip Isley said, I'm not going to go to war, but then still came, to the, the same idea
That's right.
to unite humanity.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, David. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes for the rest of the comments. The next one will be from Tad Daly.
Before I address Glenn Martin, I just want to say to everybody that the great Lucy Webster is with us today after missing the first 2 days. Lucy began working on this cause when she was younger than you, Brandon Farrell. So we're just so delighted to have you today. Glenn, I have two comments and a question. Comment one is just very nice to meet you. I've never communicated with you. I've sort of known your name and known of your work for years, and it's so nice to see you. Point two, I just love, Glenn, how you put this, not only interrelate the political structures with all the other aspects of human existence, but put it in the context of deep history and the evolution of, not just the evolution of humanity, but you started at 13.7 billion years ago.
That's right, that's right.
So that's really a very grand and useful framework. My third point is in fact a question, because I want to give you a chance to talk me out of this. I've known about your work for a long time, Glenn, but there's a point at which I myself have always parted ways, and it's frankly why I have chosen not to get involved. It's because you all decided, oh, there's no time to spare, so we have to actually enact a world constitution. We have to start being a world parliament. If you called it a model world parliament, I would feel very differently about it. And I say this with the deepest respect and admiration. It's a strategic choice on which reasonable people can differ, but I differ. I think it marginalizes us by saying we are in fact the world parliament, rather than saying this is what the world needs to create someday.
I see.
And my
thank-
question is,
thank you.
talk me out of that, please.
Thank you. And let me point out, we have several people in line and 5 more minutes. So take it away, Glenn.
Well, yeah, I know, I understand that division. You know, one parallel that's often been made is between the writing of the U.S. Constitution, which created for the great, you know, the most enduring federation among the nations that's ever existed, the federation of now 50 states, and it was written by a few elite people in Philadelphia. Right, and they were there not really as representatives, not even intending to write this Constitution, but the person from South Carolina came with this idea, and they said that this Constitution will only be valid if it is ratified by the people from each of the 13 former colonies, right? And that's exactly the same with the Earth Constitution. There's nothing that can be imposed upon anybody, but if people see how this really addresses our most fundamental problems, it has to be, it's right there in Article 17, it has to be democratically ratified by the people of Earth, right? There's no leaders, no heads of state. Heads of states can sign it, but they're required within 6 months to hold a referendum of their entire population to make sure it's ratified. So as Errol Harris, for example, who is a scholar and one of our vice presidents, pointed out, it really doesn't matter who writes a constitution. If it's good, if it's a good document that solves our problem and it's democratically ratified, then that should be sufficient. Anyway, that's my thought on the matter.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. I see 3 more hands and 3 more minutes. Arthur, if you would take it next.
Sometimes the world is in such danger that the only solution is a new story. And I think that one of the critical things we need to do is to figure out how to get creative thinkers like yourself and Sushant, who did the ground up global democracy ideas and so on, together with writers and producers in Hollywood to really generate an ongoing either Netflix series or motion picture that takes people into the kind of future where this is actually functioning. And at our last board meeting, Rod Roddenberry was open to receiving such a proposal. I've been working with Martin Sheen, who did some spots for the new the film "The World Is My Country" is going to be out on public television stations. Although it looks like they're postponing that till spring so they can get it on the World Channel. But we're you know, I could also get to him and talk about if we had a really good proposal for that could draw in some of these top people into how to get this into a vision for young people so they could dwell in that kind of future. Have you had any thought along that line so far? And
well, we have various people working with us who are, you know, have various initiatives. One of them is Peter Graves Goodman in Miami, who has been working on developing a reality TV show around this theme, around the Earth Constitution and the development of it and so on. I can, you know, perhaps I can put you in touch with him and because I know you're a master at that. That's what you do, that kind of thing. And you know, we are interested in that, you know, and we have people doing initiative in different dimensions, you know, areas of their expertise and interests all over the world, you know, and that's what he's been working on.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. And we have about a minute to go. Bill, you're up next.
Well, thank you. 2 or 3 quick points. One is that it is true, I think 11 people showed up for the first meeting to revise the Articles of Confederation, and they decided that it was a hopeless document to revise, and they began to create a national federalist constitution, and it succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, though they fought over it intensely for, well, the last 240 years. About Philip Isley, he was out there in Jefferson County in Denver, and I have mentioned numerous times over the last many years that one of the interesting lessons I learned growing up in Denver and in Colorado is that our getting rid of two major forces of war, the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant and the Rocky Mountain arsenal on chemical weapons, neither one happened because of international action or national action. They happened because of local action. The medical examiner for Jefferson County said that the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant was posing a medical threat to people. So as we look to how will this evolve, we should never forget how much the grassroots local will have an impact on this development. And
Right.
well, I'll leave it at that since I'm over my minute.
Yeah.
But
I-
there
well,
are
I
lessons
very-
learned.
I very much agree with you, Bill. I mentioned in my presentation all of the local groups, human rights groups, environmental groups, and so on, that work in the name of this. We need a groundswell of the people of Earth. They're going to have to say, we want to solve these problems. We want to get rid of this nightmare that we're now facing. My argument, as you saw, is that right now, the institutions of the world block human growth, block human development, right? And people have to see that and realize that we've got to transform those institutions if we want to move forward on the
I
planet.
guess if I could just make one last comment, and again, I apologize because I miswrote my calendar this month, so I missed 2 days of meetings. But if you haven't mentioned David Attenborough's extraordinary documentary, I forget if it's on Netflix or Prime, but it is an absolutely amazing one person's life struggling with the question of how the human race and the rest of life are going to survive on this planet. And I think those are the ways in which we're going to mobilize a global willingness to pull back from sovereignty and the myth of sovereignty over time to try and have a positive effort, not just a against effort, but a positive effort on inclusion and saving life on this planet.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Bill. We're actually cutting into our break time, so we're going to have to wrap up. Glenn, I'll let you have the last word if there's anything you want to say, and then I'll make an announcement to just adjust our times a bit. So Glenn,
Well,
anything to wrap up? Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that I invite people to study the Earth Constitution, to study our literature. There's a lot of it posted on our new website, which is still developing. So there's more coming too on that website. I also I want to say that I've enjoyed the questions that people have asked and re-meeting or meeting all of you once again, because our ways have passed here and there. Bill Pace and I met in 2010 in Uganda at the 10th Review Conference of the ICC and so on. So anyway, it's good talking with you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Glenn, for your very informative and enlightening presentation.